You've probably heard it a million times. Napoleon Bonaparte was short. So short, in fact, that the term Napoleon Complex was born. But here's a twist. What if I told you that Napoleon wasn't actually short at all? Yep, you've been lied to by history. Let's find out the truth behind one of the biggest myths ever told. Napoleon Bonaparte was the Emperor of the French, a brilliant military strategist and one of the most influential figures in world history. But despite all of that, pop culture loves to mock him for being short, cartoons exaggerate his height, comedians crack jokes, and even psychologists named a whole inferiority complex after him. So where did this myth come from? At the time of his death in 1821, Napoleon's height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches. And that's where the confusion begins. Because that was in French feet. The French measurement system was different from the British one. 5 feet 2 in French units equals about 5 feet 6.5 inches in modern-day measurements. That was average height for a man in the early 19th century. In fact, Napoleon was often surrounded by his elite guards, many of whom were very tall. Standing next to them, he looked shorter, which may have added to the illusion. And then the British, who were his bitter enemies, helped spread this image of a tiny tyrant. It was perfect for propaganda. A small man with a huge ego. But the myth of Napoleon's shortness has persisted long past his death. Why? Well, because people love a good story. And the idea of a short, angry Frenchman with an outsized ego tapped into something about the way we view power. It created a character we could laugh at. A tiny titan who, despite his best efforts, couldn't quite conquer everything. It's a funny commentary on human nature. We want to believe that greatness comes from being larger than life, but secretly, we know that's not true. Anyone who has ever been bullied or put down by someone bigger knows that size doesn't always matter. And Napoleon's supposed shortness gave us a figure who embodied that idea. There's also something appealing about a comeback story. The idea that a little guy with a big dream defied the odds and ended up ruling France is inherently exciting. It makes for great art. There are countless stories of underdogs who rise to become heroes, and Napoleon fit perfectly into that mold. In fact, the entire Napoleonic Wars can be seen as the story of a little guy taking on the world. Over time, the idea stuck. The phrase Napoleon Complex became part of psychology, even though Napoleon wasn't actually short. It's a classic example of how misinformation can echo through centuries, especially when it suits a narrative. So, who was the real Napoleon? He was a man of average height, with above-average ambition, a leader who rose from soldier to emperor, shook up Europe, and left behind a legacy that still shapes the world today. His height, just a footnote. But his story, legendary. As we continue to learn more about Napoleon, it's important to keep this in mind. He wasn't a short king with a complex. He was a brilliant military strategist who led his country to victory in some of the most important battles in history. He wasn't a petty dictator. He was a reformer who introduced many progressive ideas to France, such as the metric system and the Napoleonic Code. He wasn't a cartoon character. He was a flesh and blood human being who had a profound impact on the world around him. The truth is, Napoleon's legacy is complicated and multifaceted. He was a hero to some and a villain to others. But one thing is for sure, he was neither short nor complex. He was just Napoleon, one of the most fascinating figures in world history. Next time, someone calls you short like Napoleon, just remember, that's a myth. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell if you want more mind-blowing history myths debunked. Until next time, stay curious.